Every year in Latin America, close to 10 million children under the age of 12 die because they don't have something to eat. Because the so-called free trade agreements and all these capitalism systems are killing them. This is lynching, my friend. Lynching in the 21st century. So, question, they're still here. Or comments? Come on.
Once you leave the room, it'll be too late.
Yes.
Hi. Well, first of all, thank you all. It was such a moving presentation. My name is Colleen Aren. I am on the staff of an anti-death penalty organization that's a friend of the campaign called New Yorkers for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. But the question I actually have is for all of you. And I've noticed that in the national campaign, and particularly with national campaign to end the death penalty, there seems to be a division that's emerging between those who say, yes, let's abolish the death penalty. Everyone in the abolitionist movement wants to end the death penalty. But there are those who say that life without parole is the death penalty, is tantamount to the death penalty. And there are those who would say, well, we should always have life without parole as an option. And so there seems to be a real impasse. And I'm wondering that after your experiences, whether you would say that life without parole should also be abolished, because Marlene talked about the elimination for juvenile life without parole, but didn't mention life without parole in general. So I'm wondering how you feel about life without parole as the death penalty, and whether it should be abolished entirely as part of an abolitionist agenda.
Yes. At stake here.
Stand here because they're recording. So the audio come out very nice. Thanks.
At stake here is the idea that everybody can change. Every human being has the capacity to change. To say life without parole is to say to humanity, oh, we found an area you cannot change in. You see, so, understand that there are men and women who have been sentenced to 25 to life, to 10 to life, to under the Rockefeller law to life, and are still in jail after 40 years because they have, in evaluating them as human beings, people have made the decision that these people are not ready to come back into society. And they may die in prison. But there is always that hope that if they can change, you see, that there is the possibility that they can once again live out here so-called with us. Having been on the other side, it's hard to say. However, more is at risk than a compromise. It seemed to me that life without parole came out as a compromise, mainly among politicians. That, okay, we'll do life without parole. They knew it was the same thing. When you execute a person, you say, there's no hope. There's no hope. There's no hope whatsoever. And when you sentence a person to life without parole, that's the same thing you're saying to them. There's no hope. So my position is that, yes, life without parole is just another way of executing people. The impact. I work with MICA patients, people who have mental impairments and substance abuse problems. And, I can see the death of a faculty, of a sense of oneself, of one's self-esteem, of one's ability to get up in the morning and learn a task like cleaning your room. So death occurs in many ways, but in this instance, that's what they're saying. They're saying that there's no hope. Thank you.
Now, 1, 2, 2, 3. Yes, 1, 2, 3. Say your question and let's take note.
Well, I want to thank you all for coming as well. And that was really interesting because that was kind of like my question, what I was going to go with.
There you go.
My name is Calvin Smiley. I'm an adjunct professor here. I'm in the Graduate Center's PhD program in sociology, and I also work for Amnesty International as the state death penalty abolition coordinator in Pennsylvania. So one of the questions I want to ask you is, and I want to refer to what you said earlier, that we don't want to just mentally masturbate here, is how do you go about actually ending the death penalty? Do we go off of just moral, ethics? Is that how we appeal to people? Like, what would you say is the best way to go about it? You look at states like New Jersey, New Mexico, who abolished the death penalty because their states just couldn't afford it anymore. So it didn't really get rid of that it was wrong. It's just we can't afford it. So what would you say is the best way to go about actually abolishing the death penalty? My work in Pennsylvania is the fourth largest death row. We don't execute people, so they just sit there. But the state really has this investment of putting people there. So do we appeal to economics, politics, morals? Like how do you think the best strategy is to actually end the death penalty and give concrete examples?
I'm going to take it on just because one of the things I had on my piece of paper that I did say, Celeste Fitzgerald, who was is the director of New Jerseyans for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. It's not true that New Jersey just couldn't afford it. Knowing the sort of retributive nature of a lot of the Republican people in New Jersey, we would have figured out a way to afford it. The Center on Race, Crime, and Justice here at John Jay College gave Celeste Fitzgerald the Power of One Racial Justice Award last year because sort of like the epiphany that the prosecutor had in Mr. Reeves' case, for her religious, spiritual reasons, she became involved in that effort, and she worked on it tirelessly, predominantly from sort of a moral stance. It helped that they could also make an economic argument, but it was not purely an economic decision. And so when I said it, so we don't have this conversation 10 years from now, we as individuals, because for those of you who know David Kaczynski, who is the director of an organization that used to be called New Yorkers Against the Death Penalty, is now called New Yorkers for Alternatives to the Death Penalty. Dave Kaczynski got involved, and if you don't know him, his brother, the Unabomber, Ted, caused the death of several people. He turned his brother in, and him turning his brother in exposed his brother to the death penalty, something that he had not anticipated when he turned his brother in. He argued successfully for his brother not to be executed. Dave goes on circuit with a man named Bill Babbitt, whose brother Manny Babbitt also was a case where the brother turned the brother in, and Manny was executed. And so the two of them, and Bill is black and Dave is white. And so actually the center gave a program called The Death Penalty in Black and White. How is it that Theodore lived and Manny died? But Dave did that, started that effort, sort of as a one-person show that then lots of people joined in. And so I'd say that one thing that you have to do is have at least the one person who's willing to say, this is something I'm going to make life's work out of.
Yeah, I'd like to tackle that. How you argue it, you can't help but being moral, you can't help but being legal, you can't help but being, even from a pragmatic perspective, it's wrong to kill. But I think it is a moral issue, and I think that, those who run and rule and control our world and our media and our direction says that, the new frontier is space. I stood up on the steps of the United States Supreme